Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. So my name is Syarifah Desy Ramadhanti. In this presentation, I will present my proposal PPT that I have made. So I will show my PPT first. Okay. So this is my proposal with title The Use of Fantasy Movie to Improve Students' Ability in Writing Narrative Text. So this research will be a classroom action research for 10 grade students at SMA Negeri 10 Pontianak in academic year 2021 and 2022. Okay, now we will move to the background. Okay, so the background is the 10th grade students is a play where they are often bored with the material about the narrative text is delivered. The purpose of narrative text is to pique the reader's attention, and the majority of the professor in the class so use storytelling session as an example of how to provide narrative text content. And sometimes today's students are too bored to hear the method of delivering storytelling, and it tends not to get students' attention because they are too bored with the material that they heard. So, jadi kebanyakan students itu kebanyakan guru itu menyampaikan materi tentang naratif teks adalah dengan menyampaikan storytelling atau memberikan materi tentang story naratif yang nantinya akan dibaca dan dipahami sendiri oleh murid. Jadi, I think that will make them bored about that and make students completely unable to grasp the important points of the material that has presented. And for this reason, the use of fantasy movies as the media that can help students to understand what narrative text is like. Because the type of structure of fantasy movies is the same as narrative text. Jadi, structure of fantasy movies are same with narrative text. And the only difference is how the narrative text is presented through text and through film. So the differences between narrative text and fantasy movie is just that narrative text is through the text, and fantasy movie is through the film. Right. So in fact, students still have difficulties in writing narrative text due to several factors, maybe because they lack references, have difficulty determining a good writing structure, and less interested if only references by reading existing narrative stories. So they will be less interested if only references-nya itu dari reading, hanya cuma dari reading or story that teachers have given to the students pada umumnya. And if we using fantasy movies, it can help great students get references in technological and fun way. Jadi itu cara yang menyenangkan murid untuk mengetahui dan memahami about narrative text melalui fantasy movie ini. And of course, they will find out how to write conversational structures in narrative text through fantasy movies with guidance by their teacher and fun references. It can help develop students' writing skills through narrative text. Okay, I think that's my background why I have used fantasy movie to teaching writing narrative text. Now we move to the next slide. Okay, next slide. There's research questions and research purpose. There are also the research questions for this research. That is, first, how does fantasy movie improve students' narrative writing skills? And then how effective it is. And then for the research purpose, for teacher is to find the effectiveness of using fantasy movies to improve students' ability in writing narrative text. And for students, it could improve their ability in writing and understanding about the structure of narrative text. All right, so there's the research terminology here. So there's two of research terminology. The first one is fantasy movies. In this research, we'll use fantasy movie as the media of teaching writing narrative text. And the movie that we'll use is Alice in Wonderland as in version of action live version. Because Alice in Wonderland movie has two versions. There is the animation version in 1951 and action live version in 2010. This movie has chosen because the fantasy movie have like flow plot and easy to understand. And so researcher will edit and cut the part that will show the points of the important part that is the generic structure of narrative text. Jadi di sini researcher atau penulis akan menampilkan film Alice in Wonderland versi live actionnya, dan researcher juga akan mengedit dan memotong bagian-bagian yang akan menunjukkan poin-poin penting seperti apa itu generic structure of narrative text. Okay, so the second one is narrative text. Narrative text is a story with complication of problematic events and tries to solve difficulties through finding solutions. An important part of narrative text is narrative mode, the set of methods used to communicate the narrative through process of narrations. Okay, now we'll move to the teaching writing. So here, teaching writing are important for students because writing helps express ideas and understanding, so that it helps further on how the material is digested by students. SEO 2002 gives some pointers for teacher in implementing teaching writing. Those are teacher modeling. Second, relating process to product. Third, working with the institutional constraints. Fourth, catering to diverse students' needs. 5, exploiting the use of computers in process writing. Okay, now we move to the second literature review. There is narrative text. Percy in Permana and Zuri 2013 state that narrative is a type of essay that tells a story or a series of events in which they occur. The plot and the setting are the two main narrative text structures. For a teacher, the benefits of a lesson that can be taken by students is the most important thing, isn't it? A teacher is not a person who only wants his students to get high marks on exams or tests. He has a main goal, which is to take advantage of the lesson the teacher teaches. And then there is a general structure of narrative text. Based on Deriwienka in 1990, states that the steps for constructing a narrative are orientations, complication, resolution. But meanwhile, based on Kaufman and Ray 2010, state that narratives have been described as having several common components, including a setting, plot, or a series of episodes based on goals, attempts, or outcomes, and then resolution or the story ending. And the third is fantasy movie. Fantasy movie or films refer to films that deal with magical elements, myth, fairy tales, imagination, hallucination, and dream worlds, which include magic swords, magic spells, dragons, giants, flying horse, flying carpets, gods, witches, jinn, and fairies are the ones that often appear in the fantasy films, based on Opinion Pratista 2017. In this research, we'll choose Alice in Wonderland as the fantasy movie that will be the media for teaching writing narrative text. Alice in Wonderland has two versions. The first version is animated in 1951 and live action version in 2010. And then there's the advantage of using fantasy movie in teaching and learning. As a result, the benefit of fantasy films for teaching learning is that they may promote creativity and increase vocabulary. It may aid the development of self-control in youngsters. It may even help them improve their working memory. This is something that factual literature cannot provide. Okay, now we move to the research methodology. And then there's first one is research method. Researcher will take the class action research on 10 grad students and using qualitative and quantitative methods at SMA Negeri 10 Pontianak. Since during the pandemic, researcher will collect the data through online if it's not possible to do it on offline. And then collecting data will be planning, acting, observing, and then reflecting in class action research. Okay, and then firstly, researcher will planning before the acting, which acting could be due after the planning are done. Here, researcher will cut and rearrange the movie structure based on the what will explain about the point of narrative text, and then after that, about the point of narrative text. After that, researcher will do the writing tests, which essay writing test. Here, researcher will ask students to write the essay about what they have already understood about narrative text after watch the movie. Then, researcher will do the observation with the result, and the last is reflection. And then there's research design. In this research, writer will use class action research as the research design. Action research is a process in which educators examine their own practice systematically and carefully using the technique of research. Participants design a research questions, collect data throughout the year, analyze what they have learned, and write about their findings. Observation, interview, surveys, and journal are typical data methods that participants use to investigate their question based on Hasina 2013. Okay, here's the tools of data collections. In this research, we'll use the 3 or 4 data collection. The first one is writing test. In this writing test, student will be asked for rewrite that what they have watched and must be contain the structure of narrative text, or it could be say that retelling the story. And then observation. And in this section, researcher will observe the result about what students have right. And here, researcher will use the observation sheet for observation. We'll use the observation sheet or observation checklist. And then interview. In this section, researcher will ask the student about their understanding about the narrative text and writing correctly. I'm sorry, there's no interview. I'm sorry, there is no interview here. Saya salah memasukkan. Okay, now we move to the next slide. Okay, now there is data analysis. This data analysis in this research will use 2 methods, that is qualitative and quantitative. In qualitative method will be described the result from the observation checklist, and quantitative will be the result of writing test. The result will be input into the data table as in the example table 1 below. So the result from the writing test akan dikategorikan menjadi tabel seperti ini. Ini hanya tabel contoh, tapi kurang lebih akan seperti ini. Okay, I think that's all for my presentation. For the mistake, I'm very apologize for that. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.